Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
A day after the assassination of George Houhi, the former general director of the Lebanese Communist Party, Lebanon is on high alert. Political assassinations have been plaguing the Lebanese capital. The assassinations have been executed by planting high-tech, state-of-the-art bombs under the car seats of the intended targets. Such similarities in the methods used in the assassinations point out that the responsible parties are the same, and they possess highly advanced technical capacities, as evidenced by the ways these operations were executed.
It seems like the stage was being prepared in advance for a crime scene. Those booby trap cars scattered throughout Beirut have something in common. They all have the same fingerprints that point to the group responsible, a group who possesses an advanced technological capacity that enables them to reach their intended target. The lack of security in the streets of Beirut allowed these organized cells to execute their missions successfully. Jihad Ahmed Jibril was killed after sitting in his car in the town of Mazara. Ghalib Allawi, one of the high-ranking leaders of Hezbollah, was also killed in a similar fashion at the security square of Hezbollah in the town of southern Dahia. Ali Hassan Saleh, another senior leader of Hezbollah, was also killed in the same way. Despite the fact that a different method and a different size of explosions were used in Rafiq Harir's assassination, the use of advanced, high-tech bombs were identical to other assassinations. Such similarities prove that there are some cells that are well organized by preparing the explosives, stalking the intended targets, and then executing their missions.
To assassinate someone by the use of explosives, some factors have to be considered. The first factor is to draw a plan to stalk the intended target. The second factor is the technical support, in which an explosives expert studies the process of planting and blowing up the target. The third is detonating the bombs, which are done in some cases by the use of a remote control device.
What is attracting attention is the capability of the responsible party to leave the crime scene without any evidence behind. This was obvious in the way the journalist Samir Qasir was assassinated when a bomb exploded when he sat down behind the wheels of his car. However, in Al-Houhi's case, someone followed his car as his chauffeur drove away and then detonated the bomb that was planted under his car seat. The use of this state-of-the-art technology in these assassinations does not stop at planting explosives near the intended targets and blowing them up. It is also a well-planned process where the preparations for entering the victim's cars, planting explosives, and then detonating them take a sufficient amount of time. Are the streets of Beirut changing into blood? This is the question being asked by the Lebanese capital amidst the emergence of new information on the possibility of more assassinations being executed in the same manner. Rafiq Nasrallah, Abu Dhabi Television, Beirut.
Israel's planned withdrawal from Gaza at the beginning of next August is evoking lots of outrage and dismay among Jewish settlers who vowed to join hands with the Israeli ultra-right wing to sabotage the plan. Our Al-Madar reporter in Jerusalem visited the settlement of Gush Katif, which is the largest settlement in the Gaza Strip.
Nothing has changed in the daily lives and routines of settlers in the Gush Katif settlement, despite the plan that their houses will be demolished after the Gaza disengagement is complete. The plan will be discussed in a meeting between the Israeli Prime Minister and the Palestinian leader, which will take place in the next few hours. To settlers, the Gaza disengagement does not mean that they will leave their houses. They believe this plan will not pass.
We would like to continue living here, away from the thousands of missiles and shell attacks. For each shell attack or Qassam missile, a new family comes to live here. This is our land and we will stay here.
The Gush Katif settlers, who depend mainly on growing flowers and vegetables, continue to work on their land, getting ready for the new harvest season as if the plan for the Gaza disengagement does not exist. However, their faces can't hide the confusion over what will happen to their crops after the disengagement plan takes effect. The Israeli government has not discussed what will happen to the settlers' farms after the withdrawal.
This will be a huge loss for me. I can't imagine the size of such a loss. I'm talking about 40 acres of land that has millions of plants. I'm also talking about 20 years of experience in growing crops that are the best in the world.
On the other side, the Palestinian workers employed in these settlements are yet another issue that complicates the matters even further. More than 3,000 daily laborers come from the Gaza Strip to Gush Katif looking for employment. Some workers have been here for dozens of years, and their hopes of keeping their jobs are at stake after the disengagement takes place.
We don't have any jobs back home. The young generation is not allowed to work in these settlements. Consequently, they are taking all the jobs back home. They are working in construction sites and in the police force, thus leaving us with no jobs in Gaza. We rely on God in making our end meets. God is the one who provides for people, and we depend on Him. It is useless to say whether this engagement is good or not, because nobody will listen to us. The best thing is to leave it to God.
Sharon's government is getting ready to implement the disengagement plan from Gaza. Meanwhile, the settlers are going on with their daily routines as if the plan will not take place. The remaining time for the implementation of the disengagement plan is running short, and the time is getting closer for one side to prevail. From El Madar Channel, Shireen Yunus, Abu Dhabi TV, Gush Katif.
They say music is the language of the masses and the fuel of the body and the spirit. There is no country in the world that does not celebrate the International Day of Music. However, holding such a celebration in the city of Gaza is a surprising matter considering the political and social circumstances in the city, which is known to be the cradle of the Intifada. These songs and dances are not performed in one of Europe's theaters. It is in the Rashad al-Shawqa Cultural Theater in Gaza. Believe it or not, there is always another perspective on life. Given the difficult economic and political circumstances in which Palestinians live under Israeli occupation, the celebration of the International Day of Music is an opportunity for youth in Gaza, especially those under the age of 20, to entertain themselves and to enjoy rap music and dances presented by French and Palestinian groups.
I believe that all different nations in the world seek out music as a source of relief for youth living under occupation and war. This is a natural outcome considering what the Palestinian people are going through. They are resilient and strong people, and we are returning to music because it is the most important form of art in history.
This celebration in Gaza came in the framework of the Sister City Agreement between Gaza City and the French city of Dunkirk, and under the auspices of the French Cultural Center. The Palestinian and French believe that cultural and youth exchanges help in fostering peace.
The cultural exchange is important. It is important to the Palestinian people. It is important to the ties of friendship between France and Palestine. And at the same time, it is important for achieving peace.
تم التركيز في خلال الفترة التالية على تبادل ثقافي من خلال وفود شبابية.
This entails a cultural exchange in which youth groups from foreign countries come to Gaza to get to know its youth. And after that, Palestinian youth from Gaza will travel to Dunkirk as a way to enhance relations between the Palestinian and French youth.
زيادة المعرفة ما بين الشباب الفلسطيني والشباب الفرنسي ويذكر أن عيد الموسيقى.
The Day of Music is celebrated on the 21st of June each year, since the French Ministry of Culture declared it as such in 1982. Internationally, the music holiday has become a day of celebration, appreciated by people around the world. However, in Palestine, it is considered a day of relief and an escape from the difficulties of everyday life. Al-Madar program, Hazem Badaro, Abu Dhabi Television, Gaza.
Today, Sami Abu Zihri, the Palestinian spokesman for the Islamic resistance movement Hamas, confirmed that meetings took place between Hamas and European officials on many levels. Amidst the recent political developments on the ground, he explained that these meetings came in the context of the recent political developments in Palestine, including local elections in which Hamas gained momentum. A European official described these diplomatic communications with Hamas as purely logistical meetings. Here are the details.
The meetings between Hamas and the European officials are not secret and are not likely to require any analysis. The Europeans are trying to downplay the meeting with Hamas by communicating with the Israelis, despite attempts by Israel, which is backed by the United States, to exaggerate the threat of Hamas. Despite all of this, these meetings undermine Israel's policies of isolating the group and labeling it as a terrorist organization. Recently, the spokesman for Hamas confirmed that the meetings between Hamas and European officials took place at different levels. Sami Abu Zuhri said that these meetings came amidst recent developments in the Palestinian political arena, including the recent local elections, which reflect the advancement of Hamas. In addition, he added that it is clear that the Europeans are aware that the movement is unable to change the political makeup of the Palestinians, indicating that the Europeans issued a statement allowing their diplomats to meet with Hamas without consulting the movement. The European Union officials did not deny this, but clarified that the meetings are technical, adding that this does not change the EU's policies toward the organization, while still maintaining that the group is on the EU's list of terrorist organizations. They also added that Hamas must pledge to renounce violence and must pledge to recognize the presence of the State of Israel and adhere to principles of ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Europeans are looking for a solution to provide assistance programs to municipalities where Hamas representatives were elected, confirming that communication is ongoing. The British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw said that the EU won't remove Hamas from the list of terrorist organizations until it renounces violence completely. During his visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories, Straw also clarified this to the Israelis after it was revealed that British diplomats were meeting with local Palestinian officials, including Hamas. Before he headed to the Middle East, Straw permitted British officials to meet with elected Hamas representatives twice.
Top story, a brewing crisis between Washington and Jerusalem over sales of UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, from Israel to China. We get more now from IBA's military correspondent, Dennis Zinn.
It's not quite sanctions, but according to Israeli officials here, the United States has definitely imposed a series of punitive actions against Israel. The crisis, which just recently erupted into full-blown U.S. accusations of deception by the Israeli Defense Ministry, has been simmering for several months. The dispute stems from the sale of Israeli unmanned aircraft technology to China. Israel Aircraft Industries supplied Beijing with their Harpy attack drones in the early 1990s in a deal which infuriated Washington at the time. Tensions resurfaced over the contract last year when Harpy parts were shipped back to Israel for what the U.S. calls an upgrade. Israel denies the American accusations, explaining that the Harpy units were simply undergoing routine maintenance. And anyway, in the meantime, they said, the new Harpy deal has been frozen until the crisis is resolved. Nevertheless, according to Haaretz Daily, Washington is demanding the dismissal of at least 4 Israeli Defense Ministry officials connected to arms sales, including the longtime Director General Amos Yaron. At the same time, it reports, the US is holding back on the delivery of various military equipment to Israel until Jerusalem hands over details of some 60 military contracts recently signed with China. Washington also wants to sign an understanding with Israel regarding the regulation of future Israeli arms exports. In 2000, Washington torpedoed a $2 billion sale of the Falcon spy plane to China, which cost Israel hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation for breaking the contract. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Former Prime Minister Ehud Barak called a press conference in Tel Aviv today to try to jumpstart his campaign for the leadership of the Labour Party. His slogan, 14 days ahead of the primaries, we vote for a Prime Minister, Ehud Barak. Barak tried to get across that message, the message that he is the only Labour candidate able to topple the Likud-led government. Barak, flanked by 5 of his supporters, lashed out at Labour Chairman Shimon Peres, calling him a loser and accusing him of attempting to postpone the June 28th primaries. Barak dismissed internal party polls which show him trailing all of the other Labour candidates and delivered a swipe at another one of his rivals, Amir Peretz.
You know, if we will deploy vis-a-vis Sharon or Netanyahu, someone who had never been even a minister of the interior or not a minister at all, they will crash in the real elections, even if not in the polls. And we have to elect someone who can really look Sharon and Netanyahu in the eye and defeat them.
The 55 member states of the OSCE gathered in Cordoba, Spain last week to take up the issue of anti-Semitism. But this year, for the first time, the OSCE devoted an entire session to other forms of intolerance as well. The 2 sessions were kept entirely separate, but one Israeli delegate decided to walk into a meeting on Islamophobia and deliver a message. Paula Sleer has that story.
I think the government should be making more of an effort to reach out to Islam.
So says the former deputy head of the Mossad, David Kimchi. Kimchi was the only Israeli or Jewish delegate to walk into a session on Islamophobia and ask to speak. His message was simple.
Usually an anti-Semite is also anti-Muslim, and a person who hates Muslims usually hates Jews, and therefore we should really be working together.
Kimchi's sentiment was shared by Karim Shura of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. Shura was born in Syria, but now lives in the United States.
We face very similar challenges as far as hate crimes, as far as the stereotyping that goes on, any kind of intolerance or discrimination or anti-Semitism, Islamophobia really comes from the same root, and that's hate.
But at the same time, says Shura, Muslims in the United States are facing an increase in Islamophobia.
These so-called terrorism experts choose to continue to misrepresent Islam for their own good, for their own personal good. A lot of individuals in the U.S. continue to further Islamophobia and further the image of Islam as an extreme, hateful, evil religion.
Shura understands security concerns in America following 9/11, but insists this is not an excuse for Islamophobia.
A lot of the names listed by federal agencies happen to be Arabic names. The problem is, at the airport, when an individual goes to check in, all the person has is their name. So if your name is Muhammad, that's it. It doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or if you're 90 years old. You're Muhammad, you're going to be questioned by police. That's wrong. You say that the 19 hijackers happen to be Arab men. Guess what? The next time it might not be an Arab man.
Some delegates at the OSCE conference believed undue emphasis had been placed on anti-Semitism. Sikh leader Jagmohan Singh felt it was time to address other more acute forms of intolerance.
I would say that the other faiths like my own have not been more vocal as much as the Jews are. And this is perhaps the first attempt by a Sikh delegation to come and participate in an OSCE meet. The Sikhs living in these member states are facing a new kind of racism which has been sponsored by France, ban on the turban. And that is gradually spreading to other parts of Europe, and we are very much concerned about it.
It's perhaps at conferences like this one where such concerns can be put on the table. The real challenge now is to take them from here to decision makers of all the 55 member states. This is Paula Slayer reporting.
The United States and the European Union rallied world help for Iraq and urged Baghdad to ensure minority Sunnis help shape its future. Iraqi Prime Minister Ibrahim al-Jafari asked delegates from about 80 nations meeting in Brussels for assistance to fight the insurgency and rebuild his country. The joint EU-US event is a product of President George W. Bush's trip to Europe in February to mend ties after transatlantic rifts in 2003 over the US-led war on Iraq. The one-day conference communique urged Baghdad to intensify efforts to engage all parties renouncing violence in the political process. The communique also urged Iraq and its neighbors to cooperate on frontier security and called on all countries to re-establish or strengthen diplomatic ties with Baghdad. U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said strengthening frontier security was critical to Iraq's long-term stability.
States, the European Union, the Iraqis, and others have taken this opportunity to present this case because with the daily pictures from Iraq of the headline-grabbing activities of evil people who, with a suicide bomb or a car bomb or some way of killing innocents, can always demonstrate that they are determined.
After 2 airstrikes on Palestinian activists, Israel said it had resumed an assassination policy against Palestinians. Israel also said it could mount airstrikes with the risk of civilian casualties to ensure its Gaza pullout does not come under fire. Meanwhile, human rights campaigners accused Israel of failing to adequately investigate killings of Palestinian civilians by soldiers. Alia Tuqan has the details.
Word that Israel's assassination policy had been dusted off appeared on the surface again. An Israeli aircraft fired at least one missile today on Palestinian activists in Beit Lahia in the Gaza Strip, but caused no casualties. Earlier, Israel said it had resumed its assassination policy against Palestinian activists and could mount airstrikes with the risk of civilian casualties to ensure its Gaza pullout does not come under fire. The announcement came with Israel's confirmation of a failed missile strike yesterday on a member of the Palestinian Jihad group, while Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas were holding tense talks in Jerusalem. Admitting the missile strike, Israel's Public Security Minister Gideon Ezra said any means to neutralize the Jihad organization is relevant and possible. An Israeli security source said the assassination attempt in Gaza yesterday signaled the resumption of Israel's targeted killing policy. Israeli Air Force drones have been hovering at low altitude over Gaza since Monday evening, in an indication of preparedness for renewed lightning strikes on activists. At their summit yesterday, Sharon complained to Abbas that the Palestinian leader was doing little to rein in gunmen. However, Sharon and Abbas agreed to cooperate for as smooth as possible an evacuation of 8,500 Jewish settlers from Gaza and a few hundred among 230,000 in the West Bank set for August. But aides to Abbas said Sharon brushed aside his request for gestures to relieve burdens of occupation, including open borders for Gaza, a removal of a roadblock network in the West Bank, and further releases of jailed Palestinians. In general, the summit gave little hope to both the Palestinians and Israelis.
The history tends to repeat itself, and the way the violence has been going these days, it doesn't appear that these talks will, to me anyhow, will elicit very much. So I'm not very hopeful.
Meanwhile, and in a sign of internal instability, Palestinian Prime Minister Ahmed Qrayah's visit to Balata refugee camp in the West Bank city of Nablus was overshadowed when a group of armed Palestinians began shooting in the air. A group of gunmen followed Qrayah's delegation and fired into the air over 120 bullets, while others detonated a homemade bomb, creating an explosion that shook the camp. And in a further blow to Israel, human rights campaigners accused Israel of failing to investigate civilian killings by soldiers and creating a climate of impurity in the army's ranks. Since the Palestinian Intifada in September 2000, Israel has killed and wounded thousands of Palestinians.
Since September 2000, or the commencement of the Second Intifada, Israel has killed or wounded thousands of Palestinians. Of a total of 3,040 killed until November of 2004, 1,660 have been found to have been killed outside of combat situations, outside of any hostilities or combat, including over 500 children.
Human Rights Watch also said penalties handed out to soldiers convicted of wrongdoing were light, saying the longest sentence it found was 20 months for causing grave harm.
In fact, an Israeli soldier is more likely to go to jail for a longer period of time for petty theft than he is for killing a Palestinian. In the past 4 years, even if we were not to examine a single case, these statistics should startle and surprise you.
Despite these rapid developments, Israel insists it would complete the phased evacuation of the Gaza Strip by the end of September. Alia Tuqan, Jordan Television.
Citizens throughout the Arab world called on their governments to open their embassies in Baghdad to increase the cooperation and the ties between Iraq and their countries. Other foreign countries have already opened their embassies in Baghdad, but Arab states are still lagging behind by refraining from opening their embassies in the Iraqi capital. As is the case with Egypt and a number of foreign countries, Iraqis are asking Arab states to make intensive efforts to open their embassies in Baghdad. Iraqis further stressed Arab unity and the implementation of positive and constructive resolutions in regard to Iraq.
I hope that our friendly and neighboring Arab countries will open their embassies in Baghdad. We are hoping that the Arab people and governments will stand and support Iraqis as Iraq is going through this crisis.
All Arabs must unite together to defeat terrorist organizations that are being funded and supported by regimes working diligently to sabotage and disrupt the democratic process in Iraq.
Arab states are supposed to open their doors and embassies in Iraq. Arabs are bound by honor to help the Iraqis, especially when developed nations and other foreign countries restore their relations with the Iraqis.
Some world leaders understand the issues surrounding the rights of the Iraqis and the sacrifices made to build a free Iraq.
Iraq went through a legitimate election where the government was given a vote of confidence. Arab countries are supposed to help and support Iraqi sovereignty. Iraq now has international recognition and the government is legitimate. Arab nations should rush their relief efforts to Iraqis because they are waiting their turn to be the next victims.
Iraq suffered a lot during the former regime, and it needs Arab unity to pave the way to remove the barriers of the road ahead. Muhammad Al-Aidani, Al-Iraqiyya, Al-Basra.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.